One, love music, love life. This is Freshly Pressed, and as always, we love you to be a part of the conversation. Let us know what your thoughts and your opinions are with regards to the stories that we're talking about. The WhatsApp number is 0809 440 981. You can also tweet at Smooth981. And my analyst this morning is Chibuzor. Good morning, Chibuzor. Welcome to Freshly Pressed.
Good morning, Zibby. Good morning, Lagos.
All right, so let's dive in. First, the headline. This one is from Punch. Rising petrol price hits 300 naira per litre. Now, the scarcity of PMS, popularly called petrol, is growing worse across the country, and massive queues have been witnessed in Abuja, Lagos, Port Harcourt, Calabar, Nasarawa, Minna, and other places. Now, oil marketers are stating that this scarcity could actually get worse due to the fact that dealers can hardly access the product from only 2 depots, particularly that are dispensing here in Lagos. Now, the fuel filling stations, particularly the independent marketers that are selling or dispensing, are charging that's anywhere between 250 naira and 300 naira per litre. And this is here in Lagos. Now, in areas like Port Harcourt, it's going to 400 and even headed to 500 in certain areas on the outskirts of the city.
Okay, so this is obviously very topical for everybody. We are all experiencing this one way or the other. We've been dealing with this since, I believe we started dealing with this. The first major scarcity was towards the end of last year. Then we dragged on. We had this from December, and we were hoping that this would have ended sometime in 2022, but obviously we dragged it into 2023. The issue is clear. There's and it's been stated in the headlines that obviously there is a supply problem. Fuel stations and depots and products, they are not getting their regular supplies, and where they've stated clearly that where they even get the supplies, for instance, in Lagos, that accessing it is become more difficult. So obviously when you have inadequate supply and there's high demand, next thing that goes up is price. And that's what we see. There are fundamental issues attached to this. That obviously even the question about how much do we price PMS today in Nigeria, does it make any sense? Does it give an incentive for people to bring in this product? Does it make any sense even for the NNPC, which seems to be the sole importer of the product today? So we have that supply problem that needs to be sorted out. And obviously people are pointed to the clear and obvious fix, in quote, which is removal of subsidies. But my challenge is that we tend to oversimplify issues in Nigeria when we see removal of subsidies will solve a problem that is not just about supply, but also about mismanagement and graft. It might solve the supply problem because obviously the incentive for importers or whoever is going to even produce locally would be that they can actually charge a price that is effective, that is cost effective, and they would get their value out of it. So they do not need to cut corners. And at some point, theoretically, we will get the supply that we require at higher prices and would not have all these issues. But in the long run, there's a lot of loss that has happened due to payments of subsidies, a lot of things around that space that need to be looked at in the long term. If we look at it as another question, there was some in the related or unrelated story. I think yesterday the Lagos state government was said to have I don't know, I'm not sure if it's a proclamation or a request that dealers on major roads won't sell between particular hours. And it also points to the way we try to solve problems. There's a fundamental issue underlying it. So making declarations and asking them that they either do this or they face prosecution, similar to what the federal government did last year, which was at some point it said that the DSS or security services go and start inspecting and forcing people to sell, is people intensive, is resource intensive, but does not solve the underlying problem. So that's we need to look at the underlying problem and solve it. Unfortunately, this might be news to some Lagosians. The truth is that we've been buying the product at the official rates for a long time. Outside Lagos, a lot of people it was almost normal for them to buy that 200 and 250 for a long time. And we're not talking about just this year. So at some point, and I think I do agree with something that one of the analysts said, I think during the week, I think it was Mr. C, that we need to get rid of subsidies. How we get rid of subsidies is the issue, because obviously doing a big bang, given the other things that we need to get rid of in power and other things, will have a major effect. And unless the government thinks of how to balance the impact of the effect on the removal of these things that they need to remove over a period of time, what we would have is increased inflation, increased pressure on the government to provide additional subsidies here and there, and increased opportunities for the same things that we're trying to avoid by getting rid of subsidies. So we have to have a look at this and for once actually take we have to take a very strategic, or the government has to take a very strategic look at this. Well, either it's this existing government or government coming in, because this government has almost become a lame dog government. Because yes, to remind everybody, I remind Nigerians, the Minister for Petroleum is still our president and the president of the country. So the only person we've heard speak in recent times is the Minister for State. So these questions need to be answered, and unfortunately, there's a lot of silence from NNPC these days. Apart from telling us they have a lot of supply, there's been complete silence from our Minister for Petroleum. And what we hear from the Minister for State for Petroleum are just busts from time to time, telling us, hey, how government is doing a lot to make sure that we're getting at the prices that we're getting it. So, but that doesn't solve the problem of Nigerians.
I've got some messages coming through, and this one's from JP, and he says, good morning. We are in for a long haul on this. Massive supply gaps over a long period and cash constraints from a sole importer for 7 years. Sad. Yinka says, okay, I'm just going to pull up Yinka's message. Supply problem. Yesterday, I got a full tank at 260 naira per litre, and I've got no problems with that because I can't burn a man hours on a queue because I want to buy at 170. Please, when is this refinery going to open, and when will the precedents come to open it? At least we won't have FX issues, NPA charges, IMASA charges, or landing costs, etc., because that's where we are all going to have issues with ourselves. Right, thank you for your messages. Please keep them coming. The WhatsApp number is 0809 440 981. Let's move on to Vanguard. Now, the African Development Bank, AFDB, yesterday projected that Nigeria's GDP growth will inch up to 3.1% in 2023, saying uncertainty about policy continuity after the election and rising insecurity will weaken the nation's growth prospects during the year. Now, it's interesting. This figure is lower than what the federal government has projected, but also higher than what the World Bank and the IMF have projected as well.
Okay, I would like to see I like to look for a bit of silver lining in some of the news that comes out. So obviously, when we look at the economic growth rate, we'll take it whatever we get, especially looking at where we are now. So the AFDB is saying, the AFDB is telling us basically that we would have a growth rate of 3.1%, which is less than what the federal government is estimating or has said that what the growth rate would be. And obviously, we expect the federal government to be very optimistic in their estimations. But it's actually less by 0.1% for what the World Bank has. I think it's less by 0.1% of what the World Bank is estimated. Sorry. Yeah, it's less than 0.2% higher than what the World Bank is estimating, because the World Bank is estimating that will grow by 2.9%. Obviously, they're also doing comparisons with what the IMF is saying, which is IMF is estimating that will grow by 3.0. So if we look at all of this, we're basically estimating that our GDP is going to grow by about 3% or just over 3%. So if you're looking at the lower band of 2.9% and the higher band, which is the federal government's projected rate at 3.7%, we're estimating that our GDP is going to grow around that number. But when we look at it at where we are and on a realistic basis, and where we want to be as a country, and where Nigerians want us to be, we have underlying issues. So obviously, we've talked about a lot of the underlying issues, infrastructure, which this current government has massively invested into. Although we have to draw a line between what the investments into infrastructure and infrastructure that can actually pay for the cost and the debt that we've incurred in trying to put that infrastructure on ground. We also need to look at our population, which is always going to be an issue, because as much as we grow population, as long as we grow our GDP, if our population growth outstrips our GDP, we will have some challenges. If our population growth is just marginal, our GDP growth rate is just marginal above our population growth rate, we will have some challenges because we're having more, but we're still feeding far more. So we need to sort out some of those issues. And another thing trying to population that we need to know our numbers. At the moment, while the government can project 3.75, they are doing that based on estimates of population growth and population numbers. So, and when you're looking at that at the end of the day, whatever you have, how you allocate those resources to the numbers is going to be affected because you can't really speak to it. It and also speaks to the story you covered earlier, which is about the subsidies. When you look at those subsidies, one of the things that we've looked at is how many people, what is the demand even for the petroleum that we're spending a lot of our earnings on and an income of that could have gone into development of infrastructure, which we are using to pay for subsidies. And that's why we keep on saying that removal of subsidies will be a lot of people keep on saying removal of subsidies will be the silver bullet that solves that other problem, because the expectation is that there's a lot of graft there, but in reality, we don't have specific numbers about how much consumption are we having on a daily basis. Because if we did, we would know that was high, that has been hyperinflated over a period, and we would know who that was going to. But let's face and let's be hopeful that we will have at least 3-point-something% growth rate this year, and we can do more if we, for instance, start sweating some of those investments that have happened by this current government. And obviously, in front of Nigerians are elections in February and what happens afterward. What's going to be the policy of the new governments coming in? Will they be able to continue and be able to grow this number more than it is? Will they be able to take these headways that are coming our way with with the Ukraine war still adding to our inflation rates, security issues, and all that? How, if we don't get past some of those core issues, we will still have issues even with our GDP growing to the rates that we are projecting, and those are the real issues for the average Nigerian on the road.
Well, Yemi from Marina says, good morning. Yemi says, please allow me to preempt you. The Lagos State government has decided to regulate time of sale from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Is this a joke? We have over 5 million Lagosians who work 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. What are we supposed to do? How do we recommend paracetamol for someone who requires surgery? God help us and bless Nigeria. Now, this is about something that has been signed by the Commissioner for Transportation. So the petrol stations along major roads and traffic-prone areas need to operate only between 9 a.m. and 4 a.m. And this is the message that Yemi is referring to. What do you think about this?
I think it's one of those things that still baffle me. How and I always ask this question: Nigeria need to decide where we want to sit in terms of our policy directions long term. I would like to know the problem they are trying to solve. Are you trying to solve a supply problem, ensuring that everybody
the traffic
gets
problem?
You're trying to solve a traffic problem.
Yes. With this directive.
There's a reason why people are on the streets trying to get fuel, right? You're trying to solve a traffic. How do the rest? So the people who are on the queues are not there having a holiday. They're there because they need the product to be able to move from time to time. Unfortunately, our planning in Lagos has grown more than the original plans. So you have particular streets that were largely residential, and when you have had narrow routes and don't have enough outlets that have fuel stations sitting right in the middle of them at various arteries, and there are no points to divert that traffic. So obviously a lot of those routes, and you can see that in places like Victoria Island, even Ikoyi, where you see things like Falomo, which is always congested. So yes, that's a fundamental problem. But the truth is that all you're asking, they stop selling, people still come back at what hours do you want people to come back and fill up those streets again? So yes, while they are struggling with a traffic problem, there's still a problem for a lot of Nigerians. I drove past Awolo Road, I think early hours of this morning, about past 12 a.m. And I knew people that were basically queued up on fuel stations, hoping and praying that they will start selling products either in the middle of the night at some point. Is that where we want our Nigerians to use their productive time? On queues in the early hours of the morning because they want to buy a product. So we need to look at this and, trying to solve this problem. Yes, it might be a short-term solution for them, but we need to also focus our, you are trying to solve a traffic problem. Traffic impacts the people, but you're leaving out, you're obviously going to affect some other people. So yes, well, in their wisdom, this seems to be a good idea. I don't actually agree with it, but do I have a better idea apart from having to reconstruct those roads or remove those fuel stations from those roads and move them to places where we have more access? I don't. That's what the problem is, and even our traffic management on those areas is extremely poor.
All right, let's take a quick break, and when we return, we'll continue the conversation. We see your messages 0809 440 981.
First Bank.
This is Smooth 98.1.
Enter with your change. Enter with your change because you are not standing by any person. I don't tell you before, say I don't get change. We show the other son. We are hey, and my number be that.
Hey, what nonsense? What Japa chances? The iPhone 3. Hey, do I look cheap to you? How dare you?
Hey, buddy. See the English show. Yeah, I know they toast you. I don't get interest. And my first money wallet account be that. I beg transfer my money, give me.
Oh, so sorry. My bad.
Sorry for yourself.
You too can activate the First Money Wallet and receive cash, make transfers, pay bills, and lots more, all with your phone number. Simply download the First Money Wallet app or dial *894*1# to enjoy boundless transaction with or without data.
Thank you. You be the finisher.
All money now on First Money. You first. First Bank.
Hi everyone, this is Ruby Gang, aka Salome Aruna, and you're listening to the Smooth Breakfast Show. Do not touch that dial.
This is Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1. It's Zibby here, and my analyst this morning is Chibuzor. We're looking at the stories on the headlines, and let's move on to this one coming from Punch. Explosions rock South APC and PDP rallies. Now in River State, the APC had a rally along the Woji Avenue area in Port Harcourt, and it was disrupted following twin explosions that rocked the venue. Now, it stated that the governorship candidate, Toye Cole, was present at that venue when the explosions happened. A similar event held by the PDP in Edo State ended in disarray after so-called unknown gunmen had fired shots at the campaign ground. The police say they've launched investigations into the two incidents, and they also report that several persons were injured.
So this is one of my major problems with Nigeria. This is one of my major issues with in the last few years. The entire idea or concept of unknown gunmen. We first started using this word as a word to describe, to describe individuals that could not be identified at a particular point, but it's become part of our nomenclature now that whenever we speak about incidents like this, we mention this entire idea of unknown gunmen. And unfortunately, these gunmen remain unknown as even yet months and years after. And this is why we have recurring issues. It speaks to a larger issue with our security architecture, that people can't wake up in the morning, have access to guns, drive into an area, have shootouts, and months after we are still talking about them as unknown gunmen. But that's what it is. We have a large security issue. Elections are boiling down, and obviously we are seeing locations that have been are known, unfortunately, for this kind of activity. The unfortunate truth is that we would have to brace up ourselves in anticipation of incidents such as this in the next few months, next month or so. But we hope that the elections in itself and how they happen will be peaceful. Why we are seeing a lot of this is that given a lot of the controls that have been put into the actual voting process, one of the obvious ways that you can actually that parties and supporters of parties who want to disrupt or try and gain some
All right, let's take a few messages that we've had come through on WhatsApp.
Momentum for their candidates illegally. What they can do is basically one of the few things they can do is to disrupt the election. So while you are not, while you might not be able to influence, why you might not be able to change the voter numbers or who has voted for whom, what you want to vote for opposition candidates from actually gathering and actually voting or doing anything around that. And that's one of my greatest fears, that despite the amount of effort that has been put into people getting their PVCs and getting their cards and the entire registration action, that if given all of that and the new registrations that INEC reported, what we expect to see in this next election is a huge turnout, especially from new voters. That will only happen if people are sure that when they step out on that day to go and cast their vote, that they will get some level of safety and security. And that largely will be offered by the Nigerian security forces, which you already agree are extremely stretched. So how are we going to be able to achieve that is going to be a bit of a challenge. For me, at some point, parties and their candidates need to be held accountable some way for some of these activities. But because at the end of the day, what is happening is that when these guys disrupt these elections to get favor for a particular candidate or particular party, somebody is benefiting from it. So they can't they can't wash their hands off some of these issues. We need to get some level of accountability from the parties at some levels. If not, we would not have this kind of issue running. And this is speaking to the part of countries where we are sure that to a large extent elections will happen. Some other parts of the country, like the South, we still wait to see South and some parts of the North. We still wait to see how the elections will. The Southeast largely, and the North. We would need a lot of that, because there are the underlying issues that are going to prevent the elections from that look to be jeopardizing the elections especially in places like the Southeast, where we have the IPOB issues and IPOB. We don't know where that will end up at by next one, where the elections have to happen. And parts of the North, where we are still having the Nigerian army and Nigerian security forces are still having continuing their engagement with hostile forces and terrorists. So we have a lot of challenges in front of us with respect to this election, but I'm hoping, like in previous elections, one way or the other, we are able to go through. But yes, one of the major factors we'll have in these elections will be when voters step out of their houses to try and cast their votes on that day, are they guaranteed of getting the security to be able to cast their votes and go back to their homes after the end of casting their votes safely? And that will be a concern for a lot of people.
Okay, Austin says, good morning. About the explosions at campaign grounds, it does seem like certain people want to ensure that the elections don't hold. Nii says the Lagos state government should monitor all the fuel depots in Lagos to ensure that they are releasing petrol for distribution. Also, LASMA personnel should be mobilized to petrol stations for traffic control. Henry says, I think what the Lagos state government is saying is that they don't have the initiative to solve the supply products. Okay. And Jim says the directive on filling stations compounds the problem because the vehicles on the queues just don't go away. They wait until 9 a.m. the next day. If only some of these policies would be better thought out. And that's from Jim, who's on Awolowo Road, Ikoyi, in a field queue at the moment. Okay, let's move on to the next headlines. We see the messages. It's 0809 440 981. And moving on to the Punch. ECOWAS partners Interpol to combat terrorism. Now, the Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security of the ECOWAS Commission, Dr. Abdel Fattah Musa, had stated the emphasized the importance of collaboration with Interpol when he had a delegation led by the Executive Director of Police Services, Steve Kavana, in a meeting. Now, that statement also made available to correspondents called for a strong relationship and reciprocity between third parties and ECOWAS in efforts to combat transnational organized crime.
So what the story is basically talking about is a meeting between Interpol and within the Executive Director of Police Services for Interpol, and the obvious commissioner in the ECOWAS Commission, And it speaks to the fact. I welcome this, and I think everybody who is involved in this should welcome this. If this actually helps sort out the issues within the West African region with regards to international security issues. So, in the story, they've highlighted they've highlighted items such as money laundering and terrorism financing, which are major issues for most of the countries within the West African sub-region, most of the countries within this region have experienced especially a large growth in Islamic fundamentalism and terrorism in the last 10 to 15 years. I think the last 10 to 15 years or even more than that. And what we've seen is that, and one of the things that we tend to ask is that we understand that there are outlying international issues that have contributed to this, such as the fall of Libya and the amount of weapons that got pushed into the system and within the sub-region around that time. But you've also seen that impact a lot of the West African countries. So we're having issues today. We have in Nigeria, obviously, which is clear to us, and Nigeria is caught in that same nexus with Chad and Niger, and to some large extent also Cameroon. Well, Cameroon is not in the region, but they're just next by. We have Mali. You had Mali and you had Burkina Faso. Basically, a lot of most of the countries, especially the northern parts of the region, have largely been affected by this issue of terrorism, especially for the fundamentalist Islamic fundamentalist terrorism, which has also affected even the government and elections within those countries. So you've seen a lot of instability in countries that were previously that appear to be stable over a long period, and you see more involvement by international bodies. Foreign countries like France have been largely involved in countries like Mali and their former colonies to try and give some level of stability, either wrongly or rightly. Nigeria has had to form some partnerships with its neighboring countries to try and drive out the Boko Haram and all the Islamic fundamentalism. But obviously, there's a clear issue, which is that these guns did not drop. Somebody had to pay money for these guns. So one of the issues which is clear for me and anybody who looks at some of these things is that one of the problems that need to be sorted out is who is funding these issues and how do we hold those people who are funding them. So what I expect to see is not just the ECOWAS Commission and Interpol. We also expect, and I'm hoping that's happening already, that there's a lot of cooperation between all the various police and financial crimes agencies within the various countries to try and sort out where the issue is. A lot of dealings with Interpol to also find out who is funding this, who are funding these terrorists, and how can we cut off the supply of these funds that are funding these wars and these insurgencies. Then we can get closer. Once you're able to cut off the funding to these things, it's easier to now solve the problems in itself and actually sort out those wars. And you can now start looking at what are the fundamental issues that led to these wars in the first place. How do you set out the economic problems that have made it easier for people to actually pick up guns and fight wars instead of actually, looking for economic survival? What are the problems? Is it like a lot of people say, it appears not to be largely religious issues, but issues of economics and even geographic issues have forced some of those problems. So it's a good thing to see, and I don't think that we're going to be able to exhaust how deep partnerships like this can go, or how far partnerships like this can go in solving the problem. But they're actually quite useful to see.
All right, let's take one message. This one is from Shegun, and he says, what was the purpose of the peace accord? I believe if the security personnel want to effectively investigate all the violent activities, they can. And this is in response to the violence across the South-South campaign rallies. That's all the time that we have on Freshly Pressed this morning. Thank you so much, Chibuzor, for joining us.
Thank you, Zibby. Thank you, Lagos.
And thank you for listening. But do stay with us. There's a lot more to come on the Smooth Breakfast.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, Chibuzor. Have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Zibby. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye.